Alright guys, today we've just got this little presentation on the HMS Foyle, which is a wreck just out of Plymouth, and I'll talk to you a bit about the history of it, the story of it in the war, and actually going diving on it. Alright guys, so a bit of general information on the wreck. It was built in 1903 and was a river class torpedo boat destroyer. So that was quite revolutionary at the time, that kind of type, and it was quite a big moment in the kind of construction of warships. That's because she could do 25 knots over pretty much all sea conditions, so no matter how rough it was out, she could still do 25 knots, which was fairly impressive for the time. So she was 75 metres long and had an 8-beaver beam and weighed just over 550 tonnes. She had various roles throughout her time, but ended up in being sunk by a German mine, escorting merchant ships through Plymouth. So a bit about her history in World War One. In September of 1914, she was moved and deployed to the Dover Patrol based out of Portsmouth, and here she was tasked with anti-submarine and anti-mine. In December 2015, she was reassigned to the 1st Destroyer Flotilla because of the amalgamation of the 7th and 9th Flotilla. When she got moved, she got fitted with depth charges, which are shown in the photo below, to enhance her anti-submarine capability. So the way these work was they were kind of barrel system, and from what I can tell, the HMS Foyle doesn't actually have any launchers. So in the early designs, what they used to do was just they'd set these barrels to the depth they wanted to go off them with a hydrostatic charge, and they would either throw them off the stern or off the sides of the ship. And as it sunk in the likely U-boat area, it would hit the desired depth and set off. They didn't need to be completely accurate with hitting the U-boats, they just needed to be close enough that the shockwave would cause damage to the German submarines, which would normally cause them to leak and would be forced to surface so they could take them out. Obviously, rolling them off the back of the stern doesn't give you much range. And on the right is a picture of, just for example, HMS, one second, let me find out, Keelon, which looks like it's deployed one off the back there. And that just gives you an idea of how close these would actually be to the ship when they go off. They did eventually manage to develop a system to launch them later on in the war, but still, that would only give you a 50-metre range, so you were still very close to the area. They would normally drop these in sets, so you drop one off either side of the stern and keep steaming on, and hopefully this would get to where you assume is a likely U-boat position. So the boat eventually met its end. Well, there's two stories of how it's met its end. They originally thought that it got hit off of Dover in the Dover Straits, and while missing a bow was somehow towed to Plymouth via tugboat, while the crew on board bailing it out, where it eventually flooded with too much water and sank just 3 miles off the Plymouth Breakwater. It's now thought that that's probably not very realistic, and they now thought it was most likely struck by a mine very close to its final resting point, within 3 miles of where it was towed and actually hit. Very unfortunately with this wreck, it is a war grave, and 27 out of 70 of the crew lost their lives. 2 of the crew I found pictures of below, and we have on the left there's Stoker Peak, which is photographed there with his family. In the centre is AB George Garner, and to the right is actually the nominal roll of the dead recorded and written down, and there's a scan of that there. So there we go, just to give you guys a rough location. I've got the lat and longs up there for you guys. If you want to take those, feel free to pause it and write it down if you need them. I've circled the foil down there on this very simplistic chart provided by the Ships Project, and it's about 3 nautical miles, roughly, off of Plymouth Breakwater. So on this slide we show a kind of diagram that the Ships Project have made up, and it gives you kind of the schematics of the actual ship itself, and then below that it gives you a picture of the side scan sonar, so what's there today, with an overlay of the diagram so you can see what's left. A lot of it's been salvaged, so both of the torpedo tubes have been salvaged. The bridge has collapsed and half of it's been salvaged, or part of it's been salvaged, which I'll show you in a couple of slides. The bow gun has been salvaged. The bow is missing due to the collision with the mine. However, the stern gun is still there, and the gun on the starboard side should still be there if it hasn't been illegally salvaged. So with this wreck, it has come apart quite a bit over the years in the sea. However, the main bits that tend to be quite durable are still there, so you can still see the 4 boilers, which for you guys that are into boilers, they're not quite the kind of standard stuff we see with round boilers. They're actually high pressured triangular boilers that you will see on this wreck, so there's something a little bit different. The engine's still intact, so you can see that towards the stern, and the prop shaft you'll see going all the way back from there, so you can kind of follow it back if you find the boilers, follow them to the engine and down the pop guard, where you'll hopefully be able to see the stern gun if you're lucky. So you get a bit of salvage from the wreck. Obviously this is a war grave, so we're not salvaging anymore, but there's been some professional salvage projects throughout the years and some illegal ones, which I'll talk about as well. But here we've got the bow gun that was salvaged and actually brought into Plymouth, so that's just in Plymouth, and also the conning tower, so part of the bridge. These have since been taken down to Charlestown and are in the museum down there. We've also got on the left there, we've got some of the salvage from sound diving. So they brought up some smaller stuff, a couple of instruments and all that stuff. And on the right we have the stern steering, so that was the emergency steering for the ship. So we got a bit of story about illegal salvage. This is a rumour, so I don't really know how true this is, but it makes a good story. So in the 60s the torpedo tubes were still intact, and they're still there. Since then they've been salvaged, and quite a lot of them have been turned into scrap, unfortunately. But there was a story about some salvagers who went down and found a torpedo inside one of the torpedo tubes and salvaged it illegally, brought it onto land, and by the time the police had arrived, they were hammering at the edge of a highly unstable torpedo before it was confiscated from them and dealt with. So here we go, the bit we all care about. So actually diving the wreck. The wreck is located on the seabed, and the seabed is 51 metres. However, the top of the wreck stands at about 46 metres, so it's 5 metres tall off the seabed, which puts us nicely in the above 50 metre range, so it can be dived on normal air. The seabed itself is quite silty with small stones, so there's often quite limited visibility on the wreck, and it's a good idea to take someone who's dived the wreck before so they can actually show you around, as it can be quite challenging to navigate your way around the wreck and see all that you want to see. The best times for if you're planning is you want to aim for 3 hours before high water or 3 hours after, and that will get you nicely in the slack for this dive window. The wreck itself is very difficult to locate, so just be careful because it only stands with your echo sounder, because it only stands about 5 metres tall, and being so deep that makes it very challenging and only a small blip on the screen. Stuff to look out for when you're down there: you've got the engines, boilers, prop shaft, and the 2 guns. The 2 guns, one's mounted to the stern and one is mounted on the starboard side. The boat itself is heavily broken up and heavily salvaged, and is listing 30 degrees to port, so the port side of the boat is actually slightly buried, and there's a bit more of the actual structure still on the port side.